Oliver and I used to be the perfect couple, until the day his best friend went missing. To fulfill the promise he made, Oliver spent the next 10 years taking care of his missing brother's wife and child. But every act of care for them came at the cost of abandoning me. It wasn't until the day he left me stranded in the freezing cold for someone else that my heart truly died. But once I finally let go, it was him who regretted it. As he watched me walk away, soaring far from him, he broke down, crying his heart out. Chapter 01. The year I married Oliver, his best friend, Sam, suddenly went missing. Oliver took on the responsibility of caring for Sam's wife and child. Outsiders praised him for his loyalty and applauded me for my generosity. But as time went on, our relationship grew increasingly strained. On our 5th wedding anniversary, I waited for him for a long time. I waited from a brightly lit evening until the house was shrouded in darkness. The dishes on the table went from steaming hot to cold and then were reheated. Over and over, each one was Oliver's favorite. It wasn't until the early hours of the morning that I finally received a call from Oliver. Miranda, Lucas suddenly got sick. I'm at the hospital with Sophia. I won't be coming home for the next few days. Just as I was about to respond, I heard Sophia's voice. Oliver, what should I do? If anything happens to Lucas, how can I ever face Sam? Her voice carried a sobbing tone, muffled, as if something heavy weighed down on her. There was a buzzing noise on the other end of the line. After a moment, I heard Oliver's voice again. It's okay, Sophia. Don't be afraid. I'm here with you. With that, the call ended. I didn't even have a chance to say a word. I stared blankly at the darkened phone screen, my mind painting a vivid picture based on what I'd just heard. I could see Sophia's face buried in Oliver's chest, and Oliver gently patting her back. To anyone else, they would appear to be a loving couple. And me, his legal wife, was just an outsider, the one standing between them, the unwanted obstacle. Chapter 02. I saw Oliver again a few days later, when I went to visit the sick Lucas, standing at the entrance to the hospital room. I was about to push the door open when I heard a child's tender voice. Uncle Oliver, can you be my dad? Lucas wants you to be my daddy. I stood at the doorway, holding my breath, waiting for Oliver's response. Of course, I am your daddy, Lucas. My hand paused mid-action as I reached for the door, my heart instinctively tightening. I clenched my fist, my nails digging painfully into the flesh of my palm. It wasn't until the sting registered that I stopped. I took a deep breath and opened the door. Inside, Oliver and Sophia were sitting side by side next to Lucas's bed. Oliver was holding an apple, carefully peeling it, not for Lucas, but for Sophia. As I watched Sophia casually take the apple from him, my mind couldn't help but drift back to that night. That night, I suddenly came down with a high fever. I called Oliver at least 10 times, but he didn't answer any of my calls. In the end, I had to take myself to the hospital. I stayed there for 3 days. Oliver only came to see me once. I had asked him if he could bring me an apple. He brushed me off with, Miranda, I'm not good at peeling apples. Let the nurse do it for you. With that, he left. Later, I found out that the night he ignored my calls, he was celebrating Lucas's birthday. During the 3 days I was in the hospital, he spent them with Sophia and Lucas. And the one time he came to visit me, it was only because Lucas had caught a cold, and they happened to be at the same hospital. It wasn't until today, seeing him carefully peeling that apple for Sophia, that I realized he had never been bad at peeling apples. He just wasn't willing to do it for me. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, and no one even noticed me. It wasn't until I took a few steps forward that Oliver finally looked up and saw me. Miranda, what are you doing here? He asked, almost surprised. Before I could respond, Sophia's expression suddenly changed. Tears welled up in the corners of her eyes as she softly asked, Miranda, did you hear everything? Oliver was just joking with Lucas. You know, Lucas has never had a father. So, her voice trailed off, trembling with a hint of a sob. Enough, Miranda. What do you want? Oliver stepped in front of Sophia protectively, his eyes impatiently fixed on me, as if I was the intruder between them. I said nothing. I simply placed the fruit basket down and left. It wasn't until I stepped out of the room that I collapsed onto the cold floor, exhausted. The pain in my palms brought me back to my senses. Only then did I notice the blood. The trail of blood from my hands stretched from inside the hospital room to where I sat outside. Chapter 03. After that day, one night, Oliver came home of his own accord. He wrapped his arms around me, just like he used to, burying his face in my shoulder. You know, Miranda, Sophia is my best friend's wife. I can't just leave them on their own. That day, I only said yes to Lucas because I couldn't bear to see him like that. But I'll always be your husband, Miranda. I wanted to push Oliver away, but he held me tighter and tighter. I didn't have the strength to resist, so I just let him hold me. For the next few weeks, Oliver came home for dinner every night and left for work with me in the morning. It felt as if everything had returned to how it once was. Sophia didn't appear again to disrupt my life with Oliver. A week before my birthday, Oliver suddenly told me that to make up for the wedding anniversary he ruined, he planned to take me back to Iceland on my birthday. Iceland was where we first met. It was where Oliver and I fell in love and made promises to be together forever. I thought this was Oliver's way of making things right, until I saw Sophia and Lucas at the airport. Oliver gave me an awkward look, opened his mouth, but said nothing. Standing next to him, Sophia casually tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, her smile bright. Miranda, it's all because of Lucas being such a handful. When he heard Oliver was taking you to Iceland, he cried and insisted on coming along. I hope we aren't disrupting your trip with Oliver, she said sweetly. I looked at Oliver. He mouthed the words, please, honey, don't embarrass me. I stared at Oliver's ridiculous expression, and though I wanted to burst out laughing at the absurdity of it all, I swallowed my frustration and answered, of course. It's no problem. You don't have your own private jet. After all, Oliver and I can give you both a lift. It's no trouble at all. Ignoring the darkening expression on Sophia's face, I walked straight onto the plane. When we landed in Iceland, Oliver and I planned to go back to the little house we had shared during our time there. That house held all the memories of our love in Iceland. But Sophia, once again, spoke up, casually mentioning that she and Lucas hadn't arranged for any accommodations. This time, Oliver frowned and said, I'll help you book a hotel. I'll have someone take you and Lucas there shortly. Chapter 04. The first night in our little home with Oliver was so wonderful and peaceful. Until the early hours of the morning, I suddenly woke up and found that Oliver wasn't by my side. I watched the clock on the wall move from 12 to 5, and only then did I hear movement at the door. Oliver came in holding Lucas, with Sophia following behind him. Up until that moment, I had never imagined anyone else entering this house besides Oliver and me. There were so many memories Oliver and I had made here. We would curl up on the couch together, watching horror movies, screaming at the ghosts, and then trembling as we held each other. We would cook together in the kitchen, tasting all sorts of weird dishes we made, only to end up agreeing to go out and eat instead. Oliver and I had promised that this would always be our secret place, a place just for the two of us. But today, Oliver broke that promise. Looking at the two additional people, my heart ached. Oliver told me that Lucas had suddenly come down with a high fever, and Sophia, unfamiliar with the area, had no other choice but to come here with him. I stared at Oliver quietly and said calmly, Get out, Oliver. Take those two people and leave immediately. Oliver tried to approach me, but I pushed him away with one hand. At that moment, Sophia timidly stepped forward and said, Oliver, maybe it's better if we leave. I can take care of Lucas by myself. Oliver didn't respond to Sophia, just stared at me coldly. Then he took Lucas and Sophia and went straight to open one of the rooms. Watching him, a bitter taste filled my mouth. I forced back the tears that were about to fall and started packing my clothes in silence. By the time Oliver came back out, I had already finished packing my suitcase. He rushed forward and grabbed it from me, letting out a sigh before saying, Miranda, you used to be such a kind girl. You were willing to help anyone. Why can't you help Sophia and Lucas? Sam is gone. I have to take care of his wife and child. How else will I face him in the afterlife? Hearing Oliver's familiar way of talking, I could no longer hold back the emotions surging within me. Oliver, Does taking care of your brother's wife and child really have to go this far? On our wedding anniversary, you were with her. When I was sick, you were with her. And now, you've brought her here. What am I to you, Oliver? I'm asking you, what am I to you, Miranda? Why are you being so unreasonable? Sophia has nothing left. But you still have. I didn't hear the rest of his words. I grabbed my luggage and walked out the door. Just as Oliver was about to chase after me, I heard Sophia stop him. Oliver, Lucas is crying for you. I could hear Oliver pacing back and forth, but when the door slammed shut with a crisp sound, my heart died completely. If Oliver had chased after me, he would have found that I hadn't gone far. I was just downstairs. The moment I stepped out of the house, I made a bet. If Oliver came after me, I would forgive everything that had happened today. If he didn't, I would ask for a divorce. It was clear I had lost the bet. Before I left, I stood in the snow and looked up one last time at what used to be my home. The lights were still on. The house hadn't changed, but the people inside had. Chapter 05. The day after I sent Oliver the divorce papers, he found my hotel in Iceland. He banged on the door furiously, crying and begging to see me. After days of harassment, I finally called the police. Oliver was taken away by the officers outside, despite repeatedly explaining in English that he was my husband. But the police acted like they couldn't hear him. That's because when I called, I told them a crazy man was pretending to be my husband and harassing me every day by banging on the door. I knew they wouldn't hold Oliver for long, so when I found a note stuffed under my door 3 days later, I wasn't surprised at all. In the note, Oliver asked me to retrace the route we took years ago while chasing the Northern Lights. I was going to throw it away, but when I saw the line where he promised to sign the divorce papers if we completed the journey, I changed my mind. I decided to meet him one last time. I arrived at the starting point where we had once chased the auroras. After getting on the snowmobile, Oliver still seemed to hope this would be his chance to reconcile, clinging to me like a shadow. But I had no time for his nonsense. I twisted the throttle and left him behind. As the chase neared its end, the snowmobile made a few sharp sounds and came to a stop. I thought it was Oliver's doing, so I turned around, ready to confront him. But to my surprise, I saw someone unexpected. It was Sophia. What shocked me even more was that she had brought Lucas, who was still sick, in weather that was over 30 degrees below zero. Chapter 06. Oliver was clearly just as shocked by Sophia's crazy behavior. He grabbed Lucas and yelled, "Sophia, what are you doing?" Sophia mumbled for a moment before finally saying, "Lucas." Lucas said he wanted to see you. So I. Her excuse was so weak that even Oliver, with his brain clouded by foolishness, could see through it. He held Lucas close and scolded Sophia, telling her to hurry up and go back with him. Sophia, however, quickly responded, "Oliver, my car broke down. Can you take Lucas and me back?" Oliver checked and found that her car had indeed broken down, so he turned to me with an apologetic smile and said, "Miranda, I'll take them back first. I promise I'll come back for you soon." Seeing him make the same choice once again, my heart felt numb. But what I didn't expect was that after waiting in the snow for what seemed like forever, there was still no sign of Oliver. It wasn't until the magnificent auroras lit up the dark sky that I realized I had been abandoned again. Abandoned in the freezing cold. Abandoned at the very place where he had first confessed his love to me. And to make matters worse, my flashlight was running out of power. I was in the middle of nowhere. I would have to walk several kilometers through the snow before reaching the starting point and seeing another person. It seemed that this time, Oliver didn't just want to break my heart, he wanted to take my life too. I followed the faint tire tracks back, the dim light of my flashlight barely illuminating anything. I kept stumbling on rocks, falling face first into the snow. Sharp stones left cuts all over my exposed hands, marking them with bloody streaks. I ignored the pain in my body and just kept walking, until I started to feel colder, and my consciousness grew heavier. This time, I didn't get up. I watched as the darkness slowly swallowed me whole. Chapter 07. I didn't die after all. I woke up in the hospital. The nurse told me that a man with a Chinese face had saved me, but he didn't leave any information. I regret to inform you that you have had a miscarriage due to the amount of time you spent in the snow. My English has always been good, but this time, I couldn't understand the words coming out of the nurse's mouth. It wasn't until she repeated it that I caught the word miscarriage. I had a miscarriage. A baby just over a month old, who came and went quietly. He left without even saying hello to me. My menstrual cycle has always been irregular, and when I didn't have my period for the past month, I thought it was just hormonal imbalance. It turns out there was a little mischief maker in my belly. I thought my heart could no longer feel pain, but the dull ache in my chest told me otherwise. My heart hurt deeply. Just then, my phone screen lit up on the bedside table. I saw a photo from Sophia, an image of a half-naked Oliver and Sophia together. I stared at the photo, no longer able to control my emotions that were on the verge of collapse. I clenched my fist and pounded my chest, harder and harder, until my hand went numb. Tears slowly soaked the paper in my hand. It was the only proof that my baby had ever existed. Oliver, from today onward, I'm going to make you feel the pain I once felt, tenfold. That's the only way to repay you for the 2 lives lost because of you, the one who died in the snow, and our only child. Chapter 08. I knew Oliver would come looking for me. So the next day, I deliberately chose a white dress and sat by the window, gazing at the snow-covered ground outside. When I heard footsteps behind me, I turned around, letting just the right amount of tears well up in my eyes. Oliver, our baby is gone. He was clearly stunned. When I handed him the hospital report, he took it with trembling hands. His pupils contracted, and his eyes turned bloodshot, veins bulging on the hand that held the report. He didn't dare look up. He just held my hand, muttering, "Miranda, it's my fault. It's me. It's me. Enough." I harshly flung Oliver's hand away. I thought I could hold it in, but I didn't expect that my disgust for Oliver had reached this level. I didn't want to hear his voice anymore, and I didn't want any further contact with him, as long as he was in the same room as me. I felt sick to my stomach. "Oliver, do you know who killed our child? It wasn't anyone else, it was you. Where were you last night? What were you doing? Do you need me to remind you?" Oliver suddenly dropped to his knees, and tears the size of pearls fell one by one. He stammered through his explanation. Miranda, you have to believe me. I would never do something like that. You're the only one in my heart. Miranda, I've been wrong. I kept thinking about how pitiful Sophia and Lucas were after Sam died. I thought, you still have me, and even if you were hurt now, I'd make it up to you twice in the future. The future? Why waste so much time on you just to be abandoned again and again? I didn't want to argue anymore. I just stared at him coldly. I only saw their suffering, and I took advantage of your love for me. Thinking you'd never leave me, I abandoned you over and over again. Miranda, my wife. I'm a scumbag. I'm a bastard. Please, give me a chance to make it up to you. Miranda, I didn't want to hear it anymore, so I called the nurse to have him removed from the room. Chapter 09. In the remaining weeks in Iceland, Oliver clung to me every day. He would buy a bouquet of flowers from the florist every day and leave it at my door. He traveled to over a dozen places in Iceland, searching for foods I used to like. He begged for my forgiveness again and again, asking what he could do to win me back. Finally, I opened the door and told him, "If you can walk out from where you left me, all by yourself, then I'll give you a chance." Oliver hesitated, but just as I was closing the door, he held it open and said, "Miranda, wait for me to come back." I didn't know if he ever went, and I didn't care. It was just an excuse to get rid of Oliver. 2 days later, at the airport, I saw a news report from Iceland. It said that a Chinese man had attempted to walk alone at night to chase the auroras and was only found by rescue workers today. The Chinese face in the news was none other than Oliver and Sophia. I tossed my coffee into the trash and headed straight for the boarding gate. Today was the day I left Iceland. A week after returning home, I received an unexpected call inviting me to meet. It was Sophia, asking to meet at a cafe. When I arrived at the cafe, Sophia pulled her usual tricks again. "Miranda, I know what happened was wrong, both on my part and Oliver's, but you should never have encouraged him to go there. Do you even realize he almost died out there?" I watched Sophia, visibly upset, and turned my phone screen towards her. Sophia, let me tell you something good. I've already sent those pictures of you and Oliver to everyone associated with Sam, as well as the media, including Sam's parents. What do you think they'll feel when they see the woman who supposedly stayed faithful to Sam in public, lying in bed with another man in the blink of an eye? Miranda, how could you do this? Don't you care about your own reputation? You're such a shameless, despicable person. Seeing Sophia acting like a scorned woman, I couldn't help but want to laugh. Sophia thought I was too concerned about my reputation to actually send the photos, which was why she had the nerve to send them to me so openly. But she forgot one thing: when someone has died once, there's nothing left to fear. Thanks for the compliment. I turned and walked out of the cafe. Sophia, this is just the beginning. Chapter 10. I knew Sophia's life would be tough after this, but I never expected an even bigger scandal to explode. Lucas isn't Sam's biological son. When Sophia announced she was pregnant, it was only a week after Sam had gone missing. Sam's parents were overjoyed when they heard the news. After all, this was supposedly Sam's posthumous child. Even though Sophia gave birth prematurely, everyone assumed it was due to her overwhelming grief during the pregnancy. After all, she always presented herself as deeply devoted to Sam. But this time, after I exposed her affair with Oliver, it was like a fuse igniting all the doubts that had been buried before. Sam's parents acted swiftly, and the truth was uncovered in no time. When I heard the news, I immediately decided to pay a visit to my soon-to-be ex-husband, Oliver. Things weren't going well for him now. After the scandal broke, the company's stock plummeted. Even worse, everyone thought he was faithfully taking care of his brother's son, only to find out the boy wasn't even his brother's. He had unknowingly placed a green hat on his own brother. Now, there's speculation everywhere that the child might actually be Oliver's. After all, why else would Oliver treat them so well? Even more shockingly, some people are beginning to suspect that Sam's disappearance is connected to this pair of scoundrels. Everything was unfolding just as I had hoped. Oliver's carefully cultivated reputation collapsed overnight, and I knew that the scrutiny of others, paired with my subtle smile, would surely drive Oliver mad. When Oliver saw me again, he was extremely agitated. Miranda, have you forgiven me? Please, go clarify everything to the public. Tell them that the photo was just a fake. You've always believed in me. I removed my sunglasses, giving him a sidelong glance, and with a slight wave of my hand, a man stepped out from behind me. Mr. Oliver, I am MS, Miranda's attorney. I'm here today for 2 reasons. First, I kindly ask you to sign the divorce agreement with my client, MS. Miranda. Second, please sign this share transfer agreement. Miranda, what are you talking about? Oliver, you should know very well. The 50% of the shares you currently hold were a gift designated to me by my parents back when we were married. I didn't care to argue about it with you, but times have changed. You're now my soon-to-be ex-husband. I deliberately emphasized those last 2 words. Watching the colors change on Oliver's face brought me immense satisfaction. Chapter 11. A week after our divorce, Oliver announced that he was going to marry Sophia. I wasn't surprised when I heard the news. Sophia still held 15% of Sam's shares. If Oliver and Sophia joined forces, their combined shares would surpass mine, allowing them to continue controlling the company. I couldn't believe how shameless Oliver had become. What had I ever seen in him to be so devoted for over 10 years? Suddenly, a call came through. It was the private investigator I had hired earlier. He was calling to inform me that he had found the person I had asked him to track down. When Oliver abandoned me in the freezing snow, it was a Chinese man who rescued me and saved my life. A life-saving favor is something you can never forget. The investigator worked quickly and immediately sent me a photo of the man. The moment I saw the photo, my pupils dilated slightly, and my eyes locked onto the man's face. It wasn't just anyone in the photo, it was none other than Oliver's good friend, Sam, who had been missing for 5 years. After learning Sam's exact location, I wasted no time and booked a flight immediately. It seems Sophia has been hiding many things, and Sam's disappearance may not have been an accident but rather the result of foul play. The moment I saw Sam, despite his dazed look, I instantly recognized him. He was the real Sam. No doubt about it. The bad news was that he had lost his memory. This confirmed much of what I had suspected. Amnesia was the only explanation for why he had been alive all this time but had never returned home in the past 5 years. While talking to the old fisherman who rescued Sam, I learned that when he found Sam, his head had been struck by a sharp object, and he was bleeding heavily. I recalled the events surrounding Sam's disappearance. That day, he had been out on a boat with Sophia, just the two of them. Unfortunately, the weather took a turn for the worse, and the boat encountered a storm on its way back. Sophia was the only one who returned safely. At the time, Sophia claimed that Sam had been swept away by a giant wave, but now, it seems more likely that Sophia had struck Sam's head with a sharp object and thrown him into the sea. If not for Sam's luck, Sophia's plan would have been flawless. Perhaps fate was on my side, as Sam ended up saving my life by sheer coincidence. And in the process, I uncovered the truth. Now, the priority is to help Sam recover his lost memories. Chapter 12. 3 months later, at Sophia and Oliver's wedding, I walked arm in arm with Sam, slowly entering the wedding venue. The guests in attendance looked on with curiosity, but when they saw the man beside me, everyone gasped in shock. As Sam and I approached Sophia and Oliver, Sophia's expression grew more panicked by the second. Oliver's face became more colorful, a mix of emotions swirling within him. It wasn't until Sam and I stood directly in front of them that Sophia managed to force a shaky smile and said, "Sam, you're alive. Why didn't you contact me or your parents during these 5 years? You have no idea how desperate we were." I looked at Sophia, whose face had turned pale, and at Oliver, whose face had turned as red as liver, and smiled softly. "I heard about Miss Sophia and Mr. Oliver's grand wedding today. So I've prepared 2 gifts. The first one you've already seen, and the second is on its way." Sophia's face grew even paler, while Oliver, having calmed himself, regained his composure and frowned. "Miranda, what's your game? Sam, if you're alive, why didn't you come back all these years? What are you two up to?" As soon as Oliver finished speaking, the sound of police sirens echoed from outside. A series of uniformed officers burst into the wedding venue and approached Sophia. "Ms. Sophia, you are under suspicion for involvement in a premeditated murder case from 5 years ago. We need you to come with us." The guests were in an uproar, but the show wasn't over yet. After Sophia was taken away, the police turned to Oliver. "Mr. Oliver, there has been a report of your involvement in economic crimes. We need you to come with us as well." Chapter 13. The day after these events, Sam held a press conference announcing his return and explaining everything that had happened. After going through so much, I decided it was time to start a new chapter in my life. Before that, Oliver sent a message through someone, asking me to visit him in prison one last time. Since I was the one who had put him there, I agreed to his request. In the prison, I saw Oliver in his prison uniform, unshaven and sitting there, looking defeated. A satisfied smile played on my lips. Through the phone, he began to explain. "Miranda, that time I didn't abandon you when I was about to come back for you. Sophia drugged me. I was. Enough. Oliver, I didn't come here to listen to your excuses." I impatiently put down the phone, ready to leave, but Oliver stopped me. "Miranda, if it weren't for Sophia, would we have made it in the end?" I didn't answer right away. I just stared at him for a long time before finally saying, "You know the answer, Oliver." With that, I turned and walked away, leaving Oliver sitting there, stunned. Much later, I thought I heard the sound of Oliver sobbing, but it was already too late. After visiting Oliver, I also went to see Sophia. She had been sentenced to life in prison for premeditated murder. When I saw her, she had already lost her mind. Her hair was filthy and disheveled, and she sat there, staring blankly, occasionally bursting into laughter. According to the staff, she was about to be transferred to a psychiatric hospital. When Sophia saw me, her eyes suddenly lit up, and she lunged toward me with all her strength. Gripping the bars tightly, she stared at me with wide, crazed eyes and shouted, "It's all your fault! It's all your fault!" My plan was flawless. I looked at Sophia in front of me. Gone was the glamorous woman she once was. In her place stood a crazed shell of a person, like a monster wearing human skin. I whispered to her. Sophia, everything that's happening to you today is your own doing. If you hadn't shown up that day, I wouldn't have been saved by Sam. Without being saved, I wouldn't have found him. Blame yourself for everything. Sophia had truly gone mad. After I said those words, she suddenly began banging her head against the wall, and after her head was bleeding, she sat there, smiling foolishly. But none of this had anything to do with me anymore. Chapter 14. Side story. I took over Oliver's company again. As I looked at the familiar trees and plants around me, I couldn't help but feel a bit nostalgic. Back then, Oliver and I returned to the country together and prepared the funds to establish this company. Every plant and tree here had my hard work and dedication behind it. Until the day we got married, Oliver told me, "Miranda, from now on, you can just enjoy life at home. Leave the work of making money to me." Blinded by love, I believed Oliver's lies and resolved to be a good wife and mother at home. It wasn't until I tore off Oliver's mask that I finally had the chance to return to the company. Luckily, it wasn't too late. In the few days I've been back at the company, I've felt incredibly fulfilled. As I reviewed the previous work records, I discovered that Oliver had been secretly embezzling funds for the past 4 years. The company had also strayed further and further from the path I had originally planned. Now, the company is slowly declining, and in a few years, it will likely go bankrupt. Just like before, Oliver proved to be short-sighted. If it hadn't been for me, the company would have collapsed long ago. I made bold moves, laying off a few leaders who were merely occupying positions, having been hired through connections. This quickly caused dissatisfaction among some shareholders, but I needed this opportunity to reorganize the company anyway. On the day we held the shareholders' meeting, they united and, by a narrow margin, forced me to step down as chairman. Some of them even mocked me, saying, "Miss Miranda, after 5 years as a housewife, you've probably forgotten how to hold a pen. Better get back home, there's no place for women in a man's workplace." I smiled as I lifted the thick stack of documents from the table and slammed them hard into the man's face. "You should open your eyes and take a look at how much the company's revenue has increased, and how many percentage points the stock has risen in just the month since I've been back." The faces of those middle-aged men turned ashen in an instant. Before they could react, I gestured toward the door. A man in a black suit, standing tall and confident, slowly walked in. It was Sam. He pulled out a document with the bold words "Share Transfer Agreement" written at the top. I opened the agreement and let every shareholder in the room take a look before turning my gaze to the group of troublemakers. A playful smile curled on my lips. Sensing the shift in the situation, the group quickly changed their tune and started flattering me. I pretended to be magnanimous, letting them off the hook. But as one of the shareholders took his seat, I casually remarked, "I seem to remember your son was taken into custody last month. Is he doing okay?" Watching beads of sweat form on his forehead and trickle down, I turned the conversation to other matters. After the meeting, I invited Sam to my office. "Thank you for coming all the way here today to help me." Sam accepted the cup of tea from my hand, his lips curling into a smile as he said in a clear voice, "Miranda, if it weren't for you, I'd really be dead. There's no need for thanks between us." Looking up at Sam, who looked healthier by the day, I spoke earnestly. "Sam, you saved my life in the snow. Now, this is separate, but I won't forget what you did for me." "All right then. So what's your plan after this?" I plan. I gazed at the steam slowly rising from the teacup and then said firmly, "I plan to go back to Iceland once the company is stable." Sam paused for a moment upon hearing this, but he didn't say anything. The next time I saw Sam was at the airport. He was there to see me off. He also finally told me what happened on the boat. It turned out exactly as I had expected, but what I hadn't anticipated was that Lucas truly was Oliver's child. I had met Oliver while studying abroad, but Sophia, Oliver, and Sam had known each other since they were children. Sophia had attended the same middle and high schools as them, but while Oliver and Sam were the stars of the school, Sophia was just an ordinary girl. Everyone thought that Sophia being with Sam was her good fortune. It wasn't until years later that Sam discovered Sophia had only gotten close to him to be near Oliver. And then I appeared, shattering Sophia's dreams completely. But no one could have guessed that she would go to the extreme of gambling her entire life on a scheme that had almost no chance of success. She manipulated her way into obtaining Oliver's sperm and used IVF to successfully create an embryo. Then she took Sam on that fateful boat that would encounter a storm. She knew that Oliver and Sam were close like brothers, and she knew that Oliver would take care of his missing brother's wife and child. And through this, she hoped to get closer to Oliver again. Every step of Sophia's plan unfolded successfully. But who would have thought that Sam was still alive and that I would be the first to find him? I asked Sam. Why was Sophia so obsessed with Oliver? Sam gazed into the distance and slowly said, "Back in school, Sophia was bullied. It was Oliver who stepped in to protect her." Sam lowered his head, his eyes a little dazed, and in a hoarse voice, he added, "But back then, I was the one who told Oliver to help her." I opened my mouth to say something, but it felt as if my throat was blocked. In the end, I could only manage to whisper, "Life is unpredictable." As I boarded the plane and looked out at the scenery, Sam's words echoed in my mind. It felt like a heavy stone was pressing on my chest, making it hard to breathe. When I arrived in Iceland again, I reopened that little home, looking at everything that felt both familiar and foreign. I reached out my hand but pulled it back. I retraced the steps Oliver and I had once taken, revisiting dozens of places we had been together in Iceland. Finally, I returned to the place where we had chased the auroras. I mounted the snowmobile, revved the engine, and charged forward with all my strength. The weather forecast had said there would be no auroras tonight, but after 30 minutes of speeding ahead in the darkness, I saw a glimmer of light. I had seen the auroras countless times before, but never like this. The deep green light surged like waves, fading and then being reborn again. When I returned, I opened the door to our little home once more. This time, I looked at everything inside and acted decisively. With a blazing fire, I burned every memory of Oliver and me to ashes. Standing in front of the flames, I watched the fire burn, feeling a sudden sense of relief. From today on, the past is gone, and I will begin a new era that is all mine. The end.